Hi again. Now that we have seen how the view engine works, it's time to dive a bit deeper into how ASP.NET MVC works with the controller parts of it, right? The controller part. So far, just recapping from the previous video, we've seen that the view engine gets some kind of model sent to it, and that model we can use to automatically create some input types depending on what type of information we're looking at. We MVC still needs to know how do we do that? How do we connect what the user is doing to these different views, and how are we going to get all those data sent to the user and stuff like that? And that's the role of the controller in MVC. That's basically taking whatever data source or whatever models we have and connecting it to the views, that's what it does. So let's take a look at that. We've so far we've created we just used a default controller for a leads class, which has a name and an email address, and there's really nothing else going on there. And we scaffolded out the default controller for that, and we asked MVC to create the views for us, and we briefly looked at those views in the previous video. If you look at Now we're going to look at how that controller works. And if you look at the leads controller, we just open that. You'll see that this is a very traditional C# class. And then if that doesn't make any sense to you, or if you've never seen C# code before, this is fairly simple stuff. I'll just briefly outline some of the stuff that we have here. First of all, everything that we do is basically organizing classes, and this is how many object-oriented languages work, or even functional languages. Doesn't really matter. They're somehow organizing classes or objects. And in this particular class that we've created here, or that MVC created for us, inherits. This is how we signify inheritance. It inherits from this system.web.mvc.controller class, which is taking care of most of the behind-the-scenes plumbing for us. We don't really need to organized routing and stuff like that. Is being done for us if we inherit from this controller class here. And obviously you can create subclasses, and you can create your own classes from which you want to inherit your actual controllers from. It's fine. Just wanted to present to you how this syntax actually works. And then we have a reference to our database, which in this case is what we call a leads context. This was created for us when we set up the controller, when that was scaffolded out. That dialog that we looked at, I'll actually show it to you now. We'll go to right-click on controllers and choose Add New Controller. We'll choose the controller with views and entity framework. This is a data context that we've had created for us. You'll notice there are actually two of them. So the application DB context, that's created initially, and the only thing is that we could actually still keep using that, but I prefer to just leave that as is. That's actually what's taking care of our users. So the user that we created earlier, the test user, that's actually now stored in this application DB context, and we can query that if we want to do that. I just like to leave that as is and not really touch it. That's just a preference from my case, but that means that I can actually do all kinds of weird stuff with this leads database. And I don't need to touch my users or other stuff. That's sort of application wide, regardless of our model. So, but this is the data context that we have listed behind here, where you see private leads context DB. We can create more data contexts if we want that, as many as we like. We can, we'll look more into the data contexts later. So now let's just focus on the controller. We get a reference to that. So that means our DB object will say that it's going to be private to this class. We give it a type. This is the type it's going to be. And this is the name of it. So this class, by the way, is created for us. And again, we can, if we like, we can, I'm just going to hit F12 now, and that'll take us to the code file that actually, does this for us. This has been created. This is what the scaffolding did for us, right? So this is a class that's been created for us. So if you go back, this is a type of object that we have. Let's call it DB, right? And now we have these methods. This is how you define a method in C#. So all methods have a return type. The return type can be a void if you have a null or non-existent return value. You can have void, but you always have a return type, which is, this part. Methods can be public, private, or protected, or internal, or, bunch of qualifiers. Not going to go into that right now. And then it has a method name and optional parameters inside the parentheses. So this is how a method looks in C#. So you can see that by default, this is an extremely simple method, right? So there's obviously, some stuff happening behind the scenes here, and I'll talk briefly about that. But this is how a method looks like. You have a qualifier, public, private, internal, etc. You have a return type. You have a name for it, and then you have curly brackets, right? And then you have the message or method body inside here. In this case, you'll see that for the index method, the only thing we do is that we return a view. And a view result actually inherits eventually from action result, so we can return a view from this method. And this actually calls a new method. So you see here that when we're calling a method, we're calling that, and we're passing in this parameter here, which is called db.leads.toList. We're passing in that parameter to this view method, and that in return returns a view result, which is then returned from this action result, which is then what actually shows the page to the user, right? So if you look at this, the only thing we're doing here, we're returning a view. Now, how does the controller know which view to return? We haven't told it anyway. We're just saying, well, return a view, and we use these DB leads that we have and turn it into a list, and that's basically it, right? So just show me a view. How does it know which view to return? And it does that by context or by convention. So because we are now in a leads controller, right? We have a method called index. What the MVC engine will do is that by convention, it'll look now into the views folder, because that's where we store our views. It'll look into the leads folder, because that's the name of our method. And it'll look for a method or a view that has the same name as the method name, which is the index, which is this one, right? So now when we are looking at this particular method or action, as it's called in MVC, we're actually getting shown this view. And what you'll see here is that the model being passed into this view is of a type IEnumerable of leads, right? So that means that we have an IEnumerable. I usually means that it's an interface, right? So we don't know what particular type of enumerable thing we have. We just know that it's enumerable, and it has certain properties that we can use, including the ability to enumerate, in this case, over a set of leads that are available. So if we just briefly go down into this view here, not going to go into any more detail on that for the moment, you'll notice that there's this for each method, where we'll say that for each item in the current model, and again remember that the model is an enumerable of leads, we're going to do something. This is what we're going to do. We're going to turn out a table row, including a table data, which has the display for the name, display for the email, and a couple of links that we can use to edit and view the details and delete this particular item. So it'll do that for each of the leads in the model. It'll do this for us, right? So that's basically what this view does, and that's how this controller, the leads controller that we have. Let's just open that again. So this is what the leads controller does when we go to that index method, and that's how MVC figures out what to show us. Now, of course, we may want to show different views. It may not be that this view is the particular one that we want to do. Well, fine, there's a ton of different things that we can return here. I'm going to type a bit. I'm trying to limit my typing, by the way, because there's some noise when I do that. So I'm trying to limit that. But basically we can return different type of views, right? So you can go in and we can say, here are, by the way, one of the nice things about Visual Studio, it gives you an overview of all these methods and the overloads that you can do. So you have the default one. We can actually say just return a view, right? If you look at the home controller, right, you'll see that the index method of the home controller just returns a view. It doesn't pass any model in at all. So we can do that if we want, right? So that's one way we can do it. Or we can simply say that, you know, give me some kind of existing view, not as often used as I've seen. Or we can just say, well, give me a view using this particular object as the model. And that's what we're doing down in the next line here. We're saying, you know, take this list of leads from the database and show me a view with it. And that's when it's using this convention of looking into the views folder, looking into the leads folder, and finding a method that has, or a view that has the same name as the method name. That's this particular overload. We can also say, well, give me a view with this particular name on it. So if we were to want to show, I don't know, a different page, we don't need a model or anything like that. We just want to show a view with particular information on it. Then we can just pass in the view name. MVC would then show that to us. So you may not remember that we had an about page and a contact page on our default application. If we look at the home controller again, you'll see that this actually, well, in this case, which is kind of silly, it's actually using the method names here. So my bad. I thought it would actually pass in the view name. So it's using the same convention here. It is looking for a view called about. And it'll find that in the home folder. You'll have this about view here, and you have the same thing for the contact view, right? So you can probably recognize this. But it's using convention. But you, as I said, you can still pass in a string here with the name, and that'll, you know, look for that particular view, regardless of what this method is called. So you can say, well, great, because now I would like to, you know, show the view called home or something instead, or whatever the name is. You can just pass it in as a string here, saying something like this. Oh, that's bad. Let's try that again. Oh, like that. Okay, and by the way, if you're a Scala developer or JavaScript developer in C#, you always need a semicolon, and I think that's a good thing, but it doesn't really matter. So that's another one of the ways to override views, right? So you have, but you can still pass in objects. You can say, well, I want to show the home view, and I want to pass in this particular object, and you can say, well, yeah, there's tons of different ways you can override this view model. But there's also other things you want to return. For instance, you can say redirect something. You can say I want to return a redirect to a particular result, or I want to, you know, rather than actually returning a view, I want to send someone to another thing. For instance, if they are, I don't know, we can explore that later, but let's say we want to add authentication to our application, and if the user is not authenticated, then we want to redirect them to the login page. Right, so we can check that on every single of these actions if we want, and basically say that, well, if this happens, then redirect user, otherwise show them the view. Right. So those are things we can do. We can even, you know, there's different types of things you can return from a class. I'm not going to spend too much more time on that. So if you look at one of the other alternatives, you'll notice, by the way, that this is a comment. It's just giving you a hint. It's not actually relevant, or it's just a comment, but it shows you how you can call these different methods or actions as they are in MVC. So in this case, you would call it by going to /lead/detail/5. Obviously, because we are, you know, just clicking the links, and those links are generated automatically for us when we are logging in, and we are, you know, or when we are creating an item and we hit that details thing, it'll actually, you know, automatically create that. But we can go directly to that if we go to /leads right now. I haven't had a little link to it, so that's why I keep typing that in. So if you go to /leads now, we'll create a new lead of some type, right? So we'll go to create new, like that. We'll say test person, and the same test at example, like that. So you'll notice that the link here, if you look to the bottom, right down here, it's actually now, it has that, /leads, /details, and the ID of whatever we are looking at. So right now, by the way, we're using GUIDs as ID. If you use an integer instead, fine, then it'll be, /5 or 1 or whatever. So in this case, it's only going to link us directly to a GUID instead. So now you can see that this is actually now, without us having to do anything, created a REST-like, it's not completely REST because you can't really sort and stuff like that directly in here, but it's still REST type and REST style, and you can certainly expand it, but without actually doing anything else, it actually has this nice REST capability, or REST-like capability built in. So this is what happens. Now we looked at the details one, right? So in the details one, we'll say that I'm going to accept a GUID, and again, notice that it's actually creating these methods for us using the correct data type for that ID that we have, and then it's doing that, checking the validation for us, saying that if that's null, if you're just calling, /leads /details. It's going to return a bad request. It's going to return rather than returning a view or a redirect or anything like that, it's now going to return a status code, HTTP status code result with a status code of bad request. So if you try doing that now, we go to in here, go to details, like that. So let me now just take away this. So now the ID is going to be null. It's now going to return a bad request for us, right? So that's how that's done. And this, by the way, is IIS showing us. It's not MVC. This is what IIS is returning for us. So next thing it's doing is finding the right lead for us, and it does that by passing in that find parameter into this database context for us. And again, not talking too much about the database context so far, just wanted to show you how these methods work. It'll find the right one. If it doesn't find it, we're going to return an HTTP not found. And again, not a view, not a redirect, not a HTTP code result, where we have a separate method that we can use, which just makes it easier, rather than creating this entire line here and saying, oh, I could actually change it because the code is running, rather than actually returning one of these very rich and really nice abilities. We just say just return not found, which is HTTP 404. But if we do find it, we're going to return a view. We're going to pass it in the lead, which we know is a strongly type object of type lead. So now it's an object. That's going to go into our leads folder in the views, right? It's going to look for a view named details, which lo and behold, it finds. It's going to pass in this lead object, which now becomes this model for this particular view. Now it's going to display that. It's going to display the name. And it's going to display, both display the name for the property, which in this case is name, and then it's going to display the value. It's going to do the same thing for the email and a link to edit and go back to the list. So basically, that's a brief overview of how a control works. And again, we're just looking at this default scaffolded ones here, not going into too much detail on what that does. And similarly, you'll notice here, for instance. Just wanted to point one more out. We have two actions or two ways of accessing the create action. One is if we don't have an ID and we don't pass anything, then the only thing we want to do is we want to return a view, right? Blank. Because this is what this creating here will do, and this will build up that form for us, which we saw earlier. We have the label, and we have the editor, and we have the validation and stuff like that. This is the first view we looked at. So if we don't pass anything into it, we want to return that view, right? If we do, however, via the post method, and here you can see that decoration that will validate the CSS, the cross-site scripting. what's it called, doesn't really matter, cross-site scripting. To prevent that, we can decorate our classes with this validate anti-forgery token. But now we're passing in a lead as an object. You notice that we don't actually do anything of that. The MVC framework will actually make sure that the object is properly formatted when it's passed into this method. So it'll create that entire form for us for posting, and it will make sure that the data that gets sent back actually conforms to this lead specification. But obviously you can't trust people with that, because they can call your method with whatever parameters they want. They're just simply, an HTTP post message, or in some cases even a GET request with some bogus data. They can put whatever they want in there. So in this case, you can actually allow MVC to make sure that this object conforms to what you expect it to be, right? You can do that in several ways. For instance, here you can say you can bind to the various properties of that object that you are trying to receive. So for instance, if you don't want people to be able to edit, if you have an edit method, we don't have that here. We don't want people to edit a name that's supposed to be fixed, or an internal identifier or something like that, then you wouldn't accept that as part of this object, and it would be blank here. Right, so that's one way you can prevent people from modifying the right objects. Obviously, you can't rely on that, so that's why you can also say, well, assuming that the model state, the state of this particular model that we're receiving, as long as that is valid, meaning that we have now performed all the validation rules that we have, we made sure that everything is as expected, only then are we going to, do some stuff here. We're going to create a new, because this is a create method, we're going to create a new GUID. Assign that to the ID. Then we're going to add the new lead that's being passed in to us. We're going to add that to the list, to the leads of the database context that we have currently. And then we're going to say db.save changes. And then again, we'll talk more about how to work with the database in a later video. But this is basically how you would add a new item to the database. You don't need to worry about any of the validations, or you actually worry about the validations, but you don't need to do it here. You say, well, here's what I'd like to do. I would like to add this object to the database, and then I would like to save the changes. That's it. That's everything you need to do in order to take, care of all the database updating and stuff like that. And then after we're done, now we're going to redirect the user to a certain action, in this case, to the index, which is the one that we have on top here, which will now show us a list of our leads. But if it isn't valid, if we have some kind of validation rule that fails, what we're going to do is we're going to take that model, the object that the user sent us, containing the information that they already sent. We're going to return a view based on that. So that will basically display the create page, but now with those validation rules enabled, or invalid, so that the user can actually get feedback on what they did wrong. They might have, had too few characters in their name, or they've misspelled something, or they chose an invalid birth date or whatever. Doesn't really matter what they do. Now we're just going to repost that page for them. And suddenly, they can make their changes and repost the data for us. That's how this works. So again, this is how the controllers know how to work with the data and create or take the data and move that over to the views and show that to the user. So in this video, we basically saw briefly the controller and how that works, how it finds which view to display. And how you can, override that if you want, how you can take models or objects that you have created and pass those into those views so that the views can display them properly. How to return different types of results. If you don't want to return a view, you can return, various different HTTP statuses or redirects or something like that. or not found if you're trying to show some stuff that's not there. And finally, how you can actually, or how you would set up a create function in this case to accept an item and send that item into the database. And in the next video, I'm going to show you more how we would work with that data, and especially, if we would like to make some changes to our data, because right now we have leads which has name and email. They might have a phone number, and we might want to capture that as well, right? So we're going to look at that in the next video.